I knew my body couldn't do it, but I just wanted to see what happened in my mind. I was beat up, like really badly beat up, but I knew I wanted to come back and revisit it one day. As a matter of fact, I don't want to do this one. This time I'm aiming for the minimum is 30,000. But F&D is a really horrible disorder. After 8 minutes, it's brain damage. It's like you've just done 8 hours of CrossFit after you've had a seizure. I've put in a lot of fucking work, and I know it helps just a little. That sits well for me, and hopefully it inspires others to go on and do something as well. This is going to be on the 25th of November. It's going to be held at Proud.
Let's start with why a hamathon in the first place.
Why a hamathon? So take you back to 2021 when I did the world's first mighty hamathon. At the time I didn't know if it was going to be a world first or not, so a lot of the challenges weren't meant to be world first. They were just, I like doing stupid shit for charity.
What is a hamathon?
A hamathon came about as an idea of hitting a sledgehammer on a tractor tyre to do 28,000 hits in a day, and I chose 28,000 specifically because it was the average gait count for a marathon runner, so gait being combined left and right, or is it stride? I can't remember. But obviously we also got the number 26.1 for mile count as well, so that was kind of part of the reason as well, is trying to beat some sort of hammer, some sort of marathon related metric, but using a sledgehammer. At the time, didn't have a clue how long it was going to take, but when I set up and actually started doing the maths and testing with it, it worked out reasonably well, like it might be doable in a day, which it did end up being. So the first one was well over 28,000 thanks to shit counting, basically, which was just doing it in sets of 110 reps, so just doing like 10 one side then the other, back and forth, or it might have been more. I can't remember. For some reason, we chose to do it in sets of 110, and we just had like a clicker like you'd have at like a nightclub door or something, and just click every set. So people were taking it in turns, counting sets of the 110 reps, and you'd have like a little 20 to 30 second breather between each round, each sort of set then. And the idea was that to do X amount of sets in a day. And when it came to doing it then, we just found a lot of the times we just miscounted, and we miscounted in the best way, which was we weren't shy of the number. We were well over 28,000. So we were making sure we were leaving loads of room for error and margin, because it wasn't just me who was getting tired on the day, because it took 16 and a half hours. I was there from like 5 o'clock in the morning, so that the crew were getting tired as well, even though they were switching over and doing shifts. So there were cock-ups made in the counting, but it was more like we probably got closer to 30,000 on the day than we did, going the other way, thankfully. And it's like, with Goggins, where he's got that story where he got home from a workout and he couldn't tell if he'd missed a pull-up on the set, so he went back and did the whole workout again. That was my mindset around it. It's like, I may as well get a couple thousand over it and then just look back and be like, I definitely did 28, than be like, I might have done 28.
So if I'm there and you get to, say you do 30,000 this time, and you're like, I'm not quite sure if it's 30,000, I'm going to be like, start again. From zero. Yep. You're doing it all again.
Go to the toilet, come back, let's go again.
So why a hamathon? Why a hammer hit? Where's that come from?
For me, when I started off doing the challenges, I went to Greek mythology a lot. Now, originally it used to just be, I liked the idea and the kind of morals behind the story, and then it kind of, part of me likes the idea of the hero's journey with it as well. So the first challenge was Sisyphus. It was that idea of pushing something up Pen y Fan, was some of those like pushing the boulder up the hill every single day. And it started to take on a lot of different images and imagery, because I was doing it for mental health at the time. It went from being this like just doing this challenge of something repetitive to doing something that was more like symbolic of carrying the burden of like daily life and mental health problems. And at the time I had the South Wales Fire Department were doing support for the event when I did it, and they told me loads of stories, and they're the ones that actually said, watching you push that up Pen y Fan, just thinking about carrying like all that weight mentally, and then that release, and the stories they were telling me with that, I didn't see that kind of symbolism in it myself. But for me, it's kind of the more like the philosophical side and the symbolism that start of gets me interested in it. This one was stupid as shit. This was just, I went to Norse mythology, went Thor, hammers, hitting shit, and that was it. And the first couple of ideas I had with the hammer for doing an event was so stupid. It was like, I was going to run a marathon originally carrying like a 45 kilo hammer, and I was contacting a blacksmith somewhere in the valley. He's like, can you make this stupidly heavy big hammer for me? And he was like, I think the legal weight you're allowed to like pick up is like so and so no, I can't make that. And just the amount of material, it was just such a stupid idea. And I was like, it's a hammer, maybe just hit shit with it, It's like the exercise already exists in CrossFit gyms and functional gyms and stuff like that. It's just hitting a tractor to have a sledgehammer. So I was like, all right, cool, let's have a play around with that. And then I went to Force, went to Jack Spillett, who we've obviously had on before, gave him the idea. He was like, you're mad in the head. where do we start? So it was just me testing on a big old tyre there with a sledgehammer. First of all, it was find out like what tyre works the best. Then it was kind of like what sledgehammer works the best. We played around with loads of different sizes and weights. And even though we had all the gym purpose-built ones and all like these different height tyres, we ended up settling with literally the exact same tyre that I pushed up Penavan. It was this, not the same one itself, but it was the other side of the same tractor, so it was the same type of tyre. And then instead of all the purpose gym-built CrossFit kind of hammers with the hollow tube with the diamond nerd and grip on it, we just used a box standard JCB one, and it did the job perfectly. It was the perfect one, with one exception, which was that the handle needed grip tape on it because it was just ripping my palms apart every single time.
Are you using the same hammer this time?
I have got the same hammer.
Same tyre?
Same tyre as well, yeah. So that tyre took up force for the day because they had like 12 tyres there and we tested them all and none of them quite worked as well as this one. So I ended up taking that there for the event on the day and then that came to Browd with me where I work now. So that tyre that's actually Browd is the one that I did the first challenge on, and then the sledgehammer I finished with because we'd wrapped it in tape. I'd repainted the head on it before the event as well, and I put some like Norse runes in it just to kind of get in the mood, keep me in the mindset on the day. And because I had a bit spare with a bicycle tape as well, and it was brand with like leather, I put a little loop in the bottom. And originally I was actually going to put my hand for it and try and hold it, but because I was switching over it became awkward, but it stayed on there so well, and I put it up on my wall above my TV after I finished the event as a kind of like a reminder, like I wanted to always hold on to it. And then thankfully I held on to it because I pulled it back out for the second one then. I knew I wasn't done with it when I finished it as well. When I set out to do that challenge, I didn't know if I was going to be able to do the 28,000. After I finished it, I felt pretty good. I was beat up, like really badly beat up, but I knew I wanted to come back and revisit it one day after I'd gone out into the world and kind of adventured and learned a lot more and built my body up more and built my endurance. I wanted to come back and kind of retest it. And then this has been the opportunity for it has presented itself now.
So what's the goal with this one?
So
how many we aiming for?
Originally,
like 100,000?
Originally I did 28,000 in 16 and a half hours, whereas this time I'm aiming for the minimum is 30,000. So 30,000 is the minimum take home. Basically I wanted to set out to beat the previous record I set for myself, and I didn't want to just do it by like a couple, like 100 or 200. I was like, let's just go to 30,000. So that's like an extra 2,000 hits on top of it. And by the normal maths of what I did before, that should be like an extra 3 to 4 hours it would have been, whereas the new maths are saying that might be an extra 2 hours. So it depends on how much more fishing I've got to do in the sledgehammer and how good my endurance is on the day.
So how long did it take you before? You said 16 hours?
16 and a half hours from start to finish.
Why don't you just go for a flat out 24 hours?
That's what I'm planning on doing with this one. It's just seeing what I can do in 24 hours. So 30,000 I said is the minimum take home. That's what I want, just to smash the previous record for charity. And then anything past that is that's just testing grounds for me mentally to kind of see what I think about myself and then try to go well beyond that.
What about 50,000? Do you reckon you'll hit that?
Who knows? It could happen. I think it's probably a bit too far for my body at the moment, but there's no reason I couldn't come back in the future and try again.
I'm going to be expecting you to do 50,000 now. That's my take. So if you've learnt anything from this podcast is I'm setting Taylor's standards very high because he's done it before, and I think you should try and almost double it.
Almost double it in a day.
Why not?
Good.
Got an extra 8 hours. That's a third of the day.
So. Yeah, when the pace slows, the further and further you get for the day as well. Biggest thing
you're better now.
I am better now. So it should be faster, but you know
how much faster?
The day's going to prove it. Yeah.
How far out are we from this?
So we're doing it. Well, I say we, because I say the team. I don't even know what the team looks like yet. So we're that prepared for it. All I know so far is it's going to be on the 25th of November. It's going to be held at Browd. I haven't quite picked a starting time yet. I'm thinking start either really, really, really late at night and start and go hammering for the night. Get that kind of like the darkest hours done first into the daytime. Especially November time is going to be darker, or start super early in the morning. It's going to be something like that. Just get that hardest sort of portion where it's dark and miserable and there's no people around. Get that as the starting point. Front load the event and get like a bit like with the yoke carry. It was like start in the morning where it was cooler, so it actually wasn't the hardest portion because it was cooler and the heat was going to rise, but it was like go as fast as you can. I know obviously with pacing you do want to go steady, but it was like literally sprint with the yoke, like put the yoke in shoulders and run with it as fast as you can in the morning, and then when the heat comes just survive and as long as you can in that heat. And then we got to the night time, and then I got to the point where I just couldn't pick myself up off the floor anymore, and the physios were like, Yeah, you need to stop now. Like your body is screaming no, your head is like roaring yes, and it's like your body's literally telling you you're gonna die if you keep doing it. So I was like, oh, whatever. I really want to do that. Whatever.
I'll do it next year. I'll show you.
I do plan on coming back to the yoke one day. I'd hope so, but it depends.
You want to do a marathon, don't you?
I do. I got so close with it as well last time. I was so close. So. And if it wasn't for it being the bloody hottest day of the year, I think, and I'd actually planned to train for that distance, because originally it was a half marathon. They doubled it 2 weeks before after sitting down with Josh for a cup of coffee, and I decided, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to double it. I knew my body couldn't do it, but I just wanted to see what happened in my mind more than anything, and I was happy with what I took home mentally that day.
Yeah,
it was very fulfilling.
But then looking back, I can tell that you want more.
Of course I want more. Adventure athlete, boy.
So the reasoning behind this one's a bit different, isn't it?
This one's very different. This reminds me a lot more of my first challenge, where it wasn't kind of like I wanted to set myself a challenge to do. As a matter of fact, I don't want to do this one. I don't actually want to go and do this challenge at this time. I told myself I was going to chill out for the rest of this year.
You've told the podcast you was going to chill out for the rest of the year, but you've also told them that you're going to be doing like different challenges this year, so it's been a bit up and down for you.
It has, because originally I was going to not do a challenge this year. And then I was just getting bored and I was miserable, and I was like, you know what, I need a challenge, give me a kick up the arse in life, because that's what the last couple have been for me. Have been kind of like, I need a kick up the arse in life. I need something to focus on that's positive, that gives me like a discipline and a routine and something to follow, and kind of gives me a sense of momentum in my life. And that's what the last like doing the Liver King one, the Super Barbarian, the yoke carry in many ways was that as well, and also the Hammerthon was pretty much like that when I did it the second time. It was also, we were on lockdown as well with that second one, so for me that was another positive to focus on when there was like nothing to do. The first one, however, had a very different feeling, and this one does again, and that's because my why is a lot more in line with this one. So this one came about through my Mrs. Katie. So Katie suffers with something called FND, which is functional neurological disorder, which comes under a lovely umbrella of conditions called FMDs, which are functional motor disorders. Okay. So
I mentioned it on the podcast saying FND.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say this because my dad then looked up FMD.
Yeah.
Which you've now said is something that's like the umbrella sort of thing. But when he Googled it, because I was on the phone to him and he was like, is it FMD? And I was like, no, FND.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, because I looked up FMD and that's foot and mouth disease, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't have that. No. And I was like, I haven't butchered it, Dad. It's not foot and mouth disease. That's not why Taylor's doing this.
No, yeah, I'm doing it for foot and mouth disease, totally. No, so it's so FND is a really horrible disorder, and I've been interested in neurology and physio and kind of dealing with illness in terms of what I've seen through my own coaching experience and just a general interest in it in psychology for years. And I'd never heard of FND when I met Katie, and she told me about it at first, and I didn't understand it the way she described it. It kind of made sense. She described it as, she said, my brain's like a computer, and the computer's great and it runs good and the hardware's good, but the software's really old. It's like Windows 7. She was like, it's out of date, it doesn't work right. And after I Googled it a bit more, I hear that comparison more often, especially from like other doctors that had spoken about it. But I didn't actually understand what that meant until I found papers on it, started reading, and understood that it's a disconnect between the brain and the way it sends signals and receives signals from the nervous system. So what that basically means is that the Kerry's described this really well, actually, when I've had discussions with her, Kerry, with the physio we had on, which is almost like there's a load of draft emails stuck that can't be sent, and they can't go out to the nervous system. They're just stuck, and the brain can't send them. And then all these problems start to occur, like physical problems in the body from it. But the thing with FND is they don't know exactly what causes it, but there's huge links between things like trauma, head injuries, and like mental health problems. And a lot of it's almost kind of talked about where it's like your mental health gets that bad that the physical symptoms start to show, and then they can't be treated and they can't be helped because of the situation you're in or the extent of the damage, and then the physical symptoms evolve into this almost like you're locked in this condition then. Thankfully not for life, from what it sounds like. With a lot of what I've understood and read about treatment, is there are ways to kind of recover and get back from it, hopefully, but it's such a grey area because FMDs themselves versus like FND, it's like, one condition within it, and the literature's not very good on it as well. Like, it's been understood that it existed for such a long time, but actually what we understood about how to treat it and how people suffer with it has been shit. So what you might expect with a typical FND sufferer is conditions are very stroke-like they can be. So they can suffer with things like seizures, and they're not epileptical seizures, they're very different. So with an epileptic seizure, you're unconscious during the process, and it's more to do with brainwave signals, from what I understand. Whereas functional seizures, you are in and out of consciousness, you're actually aware you're having them, which is shit fuck scary, from what Katie's described to me, because she does suffer with the seizures with them. And it means that you can experience the actual sensation of your body having a seizure too. Afterwards, just imagine that many muscle contractions, and they can last a lot longer than an epileptic seizure. Epileptic seizure, from what I've also understood as well, I've got a lady in work who has a epileptic child, and she's I've learned a lot from her. After 8 minutes is brain damage, so it's like serious risk. Whereas with functional seizures, because it's not to do with the brainwave signal, it's to do with that disconnect between the brain and the nervous system, they can last longer. They can be rolling as well, so it can be one after another. They can calm down and go again. And because the volume of like muscle contractions going on, it's like you've just done 8 hours of CrossFit after you've had a seizure. And I've seen her wake up after a seizure before, and she's in absolute agony. After seizures as well, you can expect things like temporary paralysis, so actually just not being able to physically move your body after you've had a seizure, and that is terrifying, especially when you wake up in pain and you can't move your body and you can't even talk properly. You've also got things like eyesight problems can occur where your eyes get locked and you actually can't turn your eyeballs, a lot of really bad headaches to move around the face, dissociation, anxiety, just getting anxious when having seizures in general. There's just a myriad of horrible things. You can get IBS with it. The seizures as well themselves, and just having FND can cause stuff similar to PTSD, from what I understand too. Just anything to do with mental health, you can imagine living with a chronic condition like that just drags your quality of life down, because you can't drive a car, you can't have a full-time job or anything like that when you're suffering with seizures, because the risk of you dying becomes very high, and it really takes away your independence as well. So it's a really fucking debilitating condition, and I'd never seen it before until I met Katie, because Katie has FND. And the first time I actually seen her have a seizure was halfway at Pen y Fan. So she'd worn me Bannon before, and she knows normally the symptoms and the things that come on, like the triggers and these signs. And we were going up Pen y Fan, and we were taking the dog up there as well. And we were just coming up on the saddle, and she started to feel a little bit woozy and sat down. And she had a seizure sat on the side of the pathway. And I'd never seen it before, and it was like, what the fuck? And I went straight in like medic mode on it, and well, since then, it's been a while, and I've dealt with like loads of seizures and panic attacks and everything that come with FND as well, so panic attacks. And I've seen a lot of it, and I got quite used to it and helping her get through them and just supporting her in whatever way I can. But then there was one incident where we actually ended up going in A&E after she'd had a particularly bad seizure and it had been very long, and it was, I could see it terrified. And I'd gone to work at the time, and I'd gone to work with this really bad gut feeling as well, and I was coaching. I was really struggling to not concentrate, but struggling to settle that bad gut feeling. It was a very innate sort of like something's fucking wrong. And then she texted me and said that she'd phoned 111 and she'd spoken to them about the seizure, because she was paralyzed afterwards for a very long time too. It was like almost half an hour, and they ended up saying, look, you need to speak to 999. You can't just speak to 111. They put us straight through to 999. They were like, all right, we're sending an ambulance out. But they said it'd be like up to 4 hours or something. I was like, yeah, fuck that. So I took her into A&E that night, and then I seen just how bad the case was with how the NHS, or rather just even healthcare in Britain in general or worldwide, deals with FND, because they don't know exactly what to put it into. Is it psychology? Is it neurology? Is it going to the epilepsy kind of specialist? They don't really know where to put it, so they kind of end up playing ping pong with the people around the care systems. Now, thankfully, there are specialists out there, and there are people who specialise this, and there's a lot more research coming out on it now, and more treatment pathways. But it was just watching how, not clueless, but how they just didn't know how to help. They did everything they could that day when A&E, like all the tests you could imagine, and nothing came back useful from it. And when we were then there was another lady who was actually suffering from seizures, and I remember I had to run to a different unit to go get loads of paperwork because the reception was closed, and I came back, and Katie was on her bloody knees holding the school while she was on a seizure, and the staff didn't know like what to do because they were just so like rammed busy, because that's the way it is with the NHS, unfortunately, is they're just so understaffed and overworked, which I can definitely say with my brother being a nurse as well, the stories I've heard. And I was just sat there, and there was like, and I remember actually taking turns, like looking after this other girl who's having seizures, and then looking after Kate who's having a seizure as well. And I was just sat there, and there was this like, I felt kind of powerless to help about certain things. I did everything I knew within my power, and you know, I'm more about supporting than being helping. Like, I will more rather support my partner to help themselves than just be there and be like, I'm doing the work for you, because that's not healthy. Like, you can't play therapist for someone, a doctor for someone. But I just had this innate feeling of like, something feels so fucking wrong about this. Like, the lack of help and support for not just Katie, but like anyone who suffers with FND or something similar, like another FMD. And I was like, I felt so moved that I wanted to do something. And for me, with doing it wasn't like with the previous challenges. It's like I'd gone out into with the hero's journey, which I want to get into a little bit with this, because I think this is one that speaks to me and you both a lot, is that archetype of going through this long journey and kind of willingly taking on suffering to become more disciplined and a better person, trying to go out in the world and help others. Is that part of it is either you go looking for it or it comes looking for you. And I'd gone looking for it for a long time, and I didn't want to look for it anymore for the next few months. I wanted to chill out and kind of enjoy life a bit more and kind of recover and focus on kind of building back up in other areas and kind of studying and researching and just coming back and attacking things like adventure athlete projects for myself next year. And then I just had this innate call of like, I need to do something, and the only thing I know I can do, because I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, is like, well, I'm good at hitting shit with sledgehammers, why didn't I do that again? And I was like, it's the perfect opportunity to redo it, because I've had this itch to do it. It's been long enough, and I know enough, and I've trained in so many different ways since that I felt a lot more confident going in with what I understood to be the problems of the previous one. And it's just the availability of the equipment and the type of training and not having to travel around. Because originally with the anchor, I'd be driving around up and down the coast like every weekend or throughout the week trying to take this massive anchor for a run. And I was like, it just doesn't fit into my schedule at the moment, because it's just getting busier and busier with like taking on a second job as well.
Yeah.
But this one worked because it just would replace my typical week-long training. It didn't really make a difference, with exemption to just having some longer sessions squeezed in where I could.
So how is the Hammerthon going to help FND?
So what I'm doing with the Hammerthon is I'm fundraising for FND Hope UK, which is obviously a charity based around FND, and they have a UK based charity, and they also have an international charity as well. So what I want to do with this project is I don't just want to fundraise for it, I also want to try and raise as much awareness as I possibly can for FND too. So on the day, I'm hoping to actually have a member of the charity down there. I've had a call with the CEO as well of the charity, Dawn, who is an absolutely lovely lady, and I've seen just how small the charity is for the size of the challenge they're going to take on as well. And I just want to do anything I can to kind of raise that public awareness, get my own clients in the gym more aware of it, get people talking about it, and kind of just get it out there in the hope that maybe if just a little bit more attention gets put on it, it might just get through to the right people in the right places at the right time, that maybe a bit more research gets done. The fundraising side of it, definitely want to raise as much money as I can for them, hopefully fund more treatment pathways and research. But I know the reality of it is I'm probably going to only raise a couple of grand, because that's what happens if I'm lucky and I put the work in. I might get a couple of grand for them, and that might fund a little bit of research, but the actual scale of the problem is massive. And I know it's only a drop in the ocean, but you know, if I put in just a little bit of work, not a little bit of work, if I put in a lot of fucking work, and I know it helps just a little, that sits well for me, and hopefully it inspires others to go on and do something as well.
Yeah. Do you know much about the charity?
I don't know the like huge volumes about them. I know that what they do mainly fund is doing the research and the treatment pathways. They give things like support for carers. They run a lot of online community groups as well. So they try to offer a lot of resources to people who suffer with FND and help them find a specialist to work with. For example, when I spoke to Dawn, from what I understood, one of the closest specialists at the time was Bristol, which is, quite a drive. Imagine trying to take someone. It's not that far, but if you need to go there regularly for appointments, it's not the closest, There is something that looks like opening back up in Cardiff now. There might be someone there who's a specialist, but it's very spread out. There's not many around, particularly in the UK, and the treatment pathways are quite hard to find. So it's more like they're trying to give you the resources and help people find the best ways to be treated. Also, let them know that you're not alone, and this is actually what we understand about it. They're trying to fund a lot more research on the conditions as well. There's been a lot of not breakthroughs, but there's been a lot more research done in the last couple of years about it, which has been really helpful. And they're starting to understand a lot more now that it's a multidisciplinary approach to treating the condition. So it's not just you just go see a therapist. It's like, no, you need some sort of physiotherapy with it to do with the actual disconnect between the nervous system and the brain. Then you actually need to get some sort of therapy involved, because there's often a lot of mental health problems that come with the condition, but it also can be very trauma based, which I can say is the same for Katie. She hasn't had the brightest start to life, let's say. It's not my place to tell the story. That's for her to tell if she wants to come here and talk about that one day. But she didn't have the best start to life. In fact, it was fucking horrendous from what she told me. And that, the therapy comes into a big side of that then for helping with that and helping with things like trauma. And then also there are like lifestyle and social changes as well, because it takes away your freedom and independence when you're afraid that you can't walk to the shops on your own because you're going to have a seizure. And not like you're just going to drop and have a seizure on the floor, but you're going to be conscious and aware of everyone around you watching you having the seizure and thinking you have epilepsy, and then phoning an ambulance. It's horrible.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thankfully, I haven't had to be through that myself.
Same here.
And yeah, same for you, and most people never will.
Yeah.
And I think that's, from speaking with people on the podcast and everything, I know it was definitely the same for mountain men.
Yeah.
Is we do the things we do because we have the opportunity to. We're in a good enough place that we can dedicate time in our life to training.
Yeah.
We can dedicate resources, time, money, everything, and use our bodies in a way that other people can't.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to do it for that positive reason, essentially. That's what I've been noticing a lot, is that seems to be a really big driving factor. Mountain men were doing it for kids that have got cancer, and they will never get to grow up, and some of them will never get to grow up and ever be on a mountain.
Yeah.
So why not try and do as many mountains as you can in a day? That sort of mindset to it. Some people will never be able to run.
Yeah.
So we do marathons and stuff to be yes, we can do this. And then if we can do it, why not do it to help support the people that can't do it, rather than just be yes, we can do it and we're doing it because others can't. It's well, why don't we do something that helps them? And that's where I feel a lot of the charity and fundraising comes in.
Yeah.
I've always had a bit of an issue with fundraising when it comes to the way some people like to do it, where it's I've always wanted to go skydiving. I'm going to go skydiving and I'm going to raise a certain amount for charity. And it's yeah, great that you're doing that. But then I also know that the way you're doing it is, say the skydive costs £200.
Yeah.
You've raised £600. 200 of that is going to go skydiving.
Yeah. And it's something you've always wanted to do as well, as part of it.
It's not a challenge. It might be, I'm a bit scared of heights. I should do a skydive. I really want to do a skydive. It's just going to be scary. It's it's going to be scary. You're jumping out of a fucking plane.
Yeah.
It's going to be scary. We're not made to be jumping out of planes, but it's something you want to do. There's no, reason behind doing it.
I suppose, though, even if it does take out of it, if it meant that person's going to fundraise for charity and they never would have in the first place, there is a net win going on.
Yeah, I think so. But I feel people then put themselves on a bit of a pedestal and they're I've done this great thing for charity, and it's no, you've done it for yourself, and the charity is the byproduct. It's great they're getting something out of it, and a lot of the things, like when I was younger, I never wanted to run an ultra marathon. I never wanted to like hike up 15 mountains in a day. It's not stuff that I particularly want to do. Like, I enjoy it now because I'm like deep in it.
Yeah.
But it was never like my 12 labours. I specifically was choosing things that related to the story of Hercules. And there's a lot of things on there that I really don't want to do.
No, I can imagine.
And like you were saying, it's the same with you. You don't really want to be doing this.
No, I don't. I want to chill out, enjoy the rest of the year. You know,
Yeah.
I want to put my feet up and enjoy the autumn and Christmas and steady.
That's what makes it special. That's what helps raise the awareness. There was a thing that I did with my friends where we went homeless for a week to raise awareness and fundraise for homelessness in our local area. And we ended up, we got some really good donations. We ended up making up, I think we had maybe 25 to 30, maybe that's an underestimation, it might be more, like bags. And we managed to fill like proper backpacks, and we managed to fill them with like warm clothes, like socks. Like, we went out and we asked our local homeless people, because we knew them from doing the fundraising and being homeless with them for a start, and then just because we talked to them quite regularly, like we'd see them out and we'd sit down, have a conversation with them like they're a person, because a lot of people will just ignore them and
walk past them like they don't exist.
And that was something I found hard when I was homeless, because if you was like a busker or something, people would treat you with a bit more respect. But because you're homeless, they assume the worst, and they're like, oh, they're a drug addict, I don't want to be talking to them. Yeah. They're in these bad situations because they've got themselves there, and it's like, you don't know what's happened. Like the stories I was hearing. And then when I was there, and obviously I wasn't actually homeless, but like we would beg for money so we could get food and stuff, and then whatever money was left over we would like then spend on the homeless. And the way people look at you was insane. Like, it was awful the way people were treating you. You had some people, God bless them, that were doing some really nice things for us. And if it was ever something that was too much, like if they were ever like, oh, shall we get you a hotel and stuff, we were like, no, like that we're doing this to raise awareness and raise funds. So whatever you want to give, you can give to our fundraiser, and then we'll just take enough to make sure we've got enough to eat for the day and things like that. But it was like, we didn't want to be homeless.
Yeah.
But you do that uncomfortable thing. And we did it in November, so the weather was shocking.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to be homeless in November.
No.
You don't want to be sleeping on the streets for a week. But then you do it because that's the challenge, and these people are facing, and you're trying to be like, right, this is a challenge. Now I understand more about it because I've been through it. And it just happened that further on in my life, I ended up homeless.
Yeah.
So I think it sort of came a bit full circle, but
training for that.
Yeah, unintentional training to be homeless. But yeah, that's the way I see it. Is if you're gonna try and raise awareness, you've got to do something that's gonna be physically and mentally challenging. I don't think you should just be like, oh, I'm gonna do a skydive because I've always wanted to go skydiving.
Yeah,
I think it's great that it's happening, and it is getting more money out to charities. And it's also some people's selection of charities I find a bit questionable, because they don't know much about the charity. They haven't done any research. They don't actually know where their money's going.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an issue for me. If you don't know what the donation money's going to fund,
yeah,
how can you be happy taking donations?
For me, with the FND Hope UK, it's mainly to do with the funding of research. Yeah. But from what I understand is it helps with all the other, like, the resource management for helping people kind of connect who've got FND, like, you know, getting a group together on like Facebook. Yeah. Also run events. They do like training courses to educate in FND, both for people who have it and people who understand more about it. People understand about it more from a professional perspective. Support for carers as well, because it's classed as a disability. Yeah. So you actually register fully as a disability with it.
And this is what I respect about what you've done, because you've not only done your own research. Like, I'm not saying that everyone should be an expert on every charity they ever donate to. Yeah. Whoever's doing the fundraising should know a bit more about the charity. Yeah. But you've like gone above and beyond, because you've done your own research and you've had meetings with people from the charity to really try and understand it. Yeah. And I think that's how fundraising should be. Like, when I was doing the fundraising for my 50-mile barefoot walk, I was doing it for a charity that I used to volunteer for, so I know the ins and outs of that charity.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the way
So when I did the yoke carry, I sat down and had a meeting with them probably like every month. I was speaking to Sophie Brandon, I think it was her name. And there's another one I spoke to as well. But I'd sit down and have like a Zoom call with them once a month to chat about stuff. And it was quite interesting to see like a lot of the funding was funding like individual projects around the UK with SAS. So they're trying to stop certain things going to certain areas to do with the environment. But also a lot of it was taking the UK government and big oil companies and stuff to court. And they were taking like serious action as well. And it was really impressive to see where the money was going there. It was very clear and open and public with that. And then with the first one, it was Mental Health Research UK, and it was just directly funding papers and research into mental health and treatments there. Yeah. And then with the Centre for Humane Tech, that was a bit harder to try and figure out with that, because they were more of a non-profit organisation than they were like a registered charity, and they were more for just taking things like Facebook and Google to court, so it was more funding stuff like that. Yeah. So, and that for me was like something to do with mental health, because it was the way tech was affecting mental health that I was seeing in myself and others, but it wasn't so clear-cut with money was going with that. But I did, what I could with it, but they were harder to get in touch with, but for sure.
Yeah, because I actually did a documentary for a charity before.
Yeah.
In Cambodia, and I was like, I was not long finishing school. I was looking for a change in jobs and stuff. I had my own videography business, so I went out and I did some videography work for this charity, making a short documentary about them. And from doing that, I realised that not every charity is actually that beneficial. Seeing where the money was going, because it was like a teacher training thing. So from the whole history of Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge and everything, which is this horrendous genocide, and it killed, I could be wrong in this, but I'm pretty sure it was something like a third of the population. And then them trying to recover from that, but financially, like, they weren't in a place to, and a lot of I think it's Chinese and businessmen from Hong Kong and stuff sort of came over, made it into this massive tourist attraction, being like, yeah, we'll bring money in, and then the money's going back to their home countries, and Cambodia sees none of it. And I learnt all this just from speaking with the locals. I did a lot of travelling around and seeing a lot of people. And this teacher training company was selling it we got teachers to sign up, we're getting donations in, and the teachers pay for their own flights and accommodation and everything, and they go out there and deliver training for the teachers in Cambodia, so then the Cambodians can be more educated and do better outside of what they're doing currently, and when they grow up they can have more businesses and they'll all speak English and everything like that. And it sounded amazing. I was like, I'm fully up for supporting Cambodia and the development of the country. And then I get out there and I'm speaking to the teachers that are coming on this training, not the ones from England going out, but the ones in Cambodia that we're providing the training for. And I had to cut out a lot of the interviews because they were saying how bad the charity is, how they don't get any support, how they get different teachers coming in each year, so then the teachers are teaching them the same thing every year and it's not progressing, and there's basically no development. And then I found out from one of the teachers that had gone on it for multiple years knew the guys running the charity, and they were just getting a massive paycheck every year just to organise it. And it's is that where most of the money's going to? It's yeah, that's where most of the money's going, is to them, and we get a holiday out of it, so we're happy, teachers having a cheap jolly in Cambodia for a month, do a bit of coaching on the side to these Cambodian teachers, and they're going to be happy enough. And the Cambodian teachers really weren't happy enough. They were this is taking up our time and resources, and it's quite a travel for some of them to get to the schools. It's very financially they're not doing well, and travel's not the best around Cambodia, and it was they're not really getting anything from this, but the teachers are happy, they're getting a holiday, and the guys are happy because they're getting a paycheck. And that's when I realised some charities aren't out there to help massively.
Yeah.
It's just a way to get around certain taxes and stuff like that. So I've been very conscious of what charities I give money to since then.
I have as well. I've definitely put in. Obviously, I haven't had that same experience, but I've always wanted to spend a bit more time. Like when I looked for the FND charity one, look for, there wasn't many out there. No surprise. Then there was 2 in the UK, and I ended up settling with FND Hope because after doing enough digging into what they were about and what they offered, I thought that sounded like I wanted to work with them.
Yeah.
And when I sit down and had a meeting with Dawn, I actually found out that the CEO of the charity herself has FND. So I was like, oh, okay, that means a lot more than this does. And I could see when I had a call with her that she wasn't in some big CEO office. She was sat in like her little home office with like a little cork pegboard in the background with sticky notes on it and all that. And I was like, wow, you guys with FND are really against the fucking rocks, aren't you? Like you need someone out there who's willing to be a bloody idiot for you to go, look at this, go help them, go fucking do it now because they need it. Yeah. And that's where I suppose I'm trying to come in a bit.
Well, everything you can do, you got to do, don't you?
Yeah.
Something that's close to your heart in your life, as I said on one of the podcasts, like it's something that you're now doing because you've had some experience with it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to change it, and I think that's a good thing to do in the world. Is you see something that's wrong and needs help, and you try and be the person, not to fix it because we can't fix things, but to try and help as best you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, fair play.
Thank you.
Keep going. So moving on from FND UK, then let's get back down to the challenge. So you're aiming for 30,000 hits.
30,000 hits.
You've done 28,000 before.
I know that's manageable.
Yeah. Training. How are you training for it? How has it changed? What have you learnt from last time?
So last time it was I was at home. I was in my my mum's driveway, and I had a sledgehammer, a tyre, barbell, a couple of plates, stuff like that. And I'd love to say the steel mace, but I only got the steel mace at the very end of training, so I used it for the last block of training from 9 to 9 Fitness in Scotland. And it was working with Jack again. I would speak to Jack would build a program, I would kind of modify depending on like how the program felt for me, and I would speak back to him, but like, this felt like that, what should we do, what should we change? And it started off again with a very general block, and it was like tapered down to the events. We started off with lots of like, what equipment do we have, let's just focus on like training the lats, let's do it. We didn't do a lot of hammering at all. There was very few hammering sessions. I think it was only on the Saturday did a hammering session, and it wasn't even that long. So it wasn't that specific, this one I found, and we got slightly more specific, and then we got to, just before the event, we were in the gym, because the gyms are open then, so I was going in, I was PTing with Jack, and we'd go in, and we didn't even have like a session programmed out. We'd go in and just do different stuff with like some of the heavy maces, and we'd do like a little bit of pulling movements and stuff, but it was good, and it was specific, but because of the way that the challenge worked, and it was like picking something, there's not like a written paper on how does hitting a sledgehammer against a tyre for like 10 hours like affect your body and the breakdown of this and that. There's not really research into that, so it's kind of like,
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why. I go do something stupid, I kind of try to understand and interpret what my body's telling me, and I try speak to physio as well, and they interpret what's going on in my body, and then I try relay that to Jack, and based off of that we would try and build a program for it. So it's very bloody hard and challenging to try and get someone else to understand what your body's going through with these things when they're not your cookie cut kind of sports. And for that, what eventually happened is on the day, everything felt good. My back felt good, my shoulders felt good, my traps felt good. 2 hours in, my forearms and wrists blew up on fire like crazy. And the whole time I trained, I think the longest I'd done was like a 3 or 4 hour hammering session, and they'd never been a problem the whole time I trained for it. And then on the day, my wrists were in absolute agony. And then Hal Griffiths showed up, who was my physio at the time, and he's really good, well, not really good buds. He went to school with my dad, and he was really good buds with my dad in school. And so they were stood there having a chin wag while I was doing this, and he showed up there with a cup of coffee, and he comes over, and he just digs his thumb in my arm and puts a compression on, which I can describe as the longest compression I've ever had in my life. And he's just pushing his thumb down and down and down my forearm, and it felt like he was going to put his thumb through the bloody other side. Like I was expecting it to pop out my elbow. And he said, like, in all of his time of doing, like, physio, like, he's rarely seen anything as bad as what my forearms like that day. So it probably wasn't just the accumulation of hammering on the day. It was obviously the accumulation of the training, but also probably prior years of training, because I'd never had my forearms treated before. So they were just, like, knotted up to holy hell. There was like walnuts in there. So that was something that we failed to pick up on in the training at all, was just how much it was going to affect my wrists. So we had a little bit of wrist stuff going on, but nothing compared to what they actually needed. So that was a massive take on for that one, is my wrists. And then, as I said, I put the steel mace up towards the end. So if you don't really know what steel mace is, it's just a pole with a giant ball on the end, and the ball is weighted like a kettlebell. And then because you have this long staff on it, you can move the weight further and further away from your hands, and it creates more and more of a lever. So your hands become the fulcrum, and also you've got your load at one end, but also your hands become the force as well that you put on to this fulcrum. So you're trying to pivot this weight around your body in different ways, and because it's similar to the sledgehammer and you can do these big rotation movements, it was the perfect piece of equipment for training with. But when we first started with it, we only had one mace. It was like 7.5 kilo one, and we didn't really know what to do with it much because I wasn't really well versed in it. Jack hadn't really done much with them as well, because they're not very commonplace at all in the UK, especially like a few years ago this was as well. So 2021, that was 2 years ago, so they were even less commonplace. So they're picking up more and more momentum a lot faster now. But it was like On It in America were really popular with them, but before that it was like no one had really heard of them. They were in Pakistan and India. They never went anywhere. They stayed around. They were meant to be the first bit of strength training equipment on the planet. And originally it was like Persian and Hindu warriors used to do like a strength training boot camp with them in between they're kind of like warring in the, I think it'd be in the winter months, they'd be strength training to keep their body like supple and strong using the mace. And it was recognised as the first bit of strength equipment in history. And then it didn't really go to the West, it just stayed in the Middle East. And like things like there's the Great Gamma, the really famous wrestler who trained with the steel club. And actually, if you do a halo with a steel club, sometimes it's called a gamma cast, that named after him. So in India, these steel clubs and maces didn't really go anywhere, and they're really popular. But then they branched out, like On It in America. Not branched out, On It went and kind of rediscovered them and branched out to America more. And they became a bit of a training niche in the UK, but now they're popular more. Wolverson even makes steel maces now, so they're getting way more popular again, or rather being reintroduced to the West, or introduced for the West the first time. We don't really know how best to talk about it in that regard, but anyway, mace, perfect bit of equipment for training for this hammerthon. And I picked up at the very end, and then they sent me a rack of the heavier ones. And I remember one of them was like a 25-pound mace. Doesn't sound like a lot, 25 pounds. The ball is probably this big on it, but I couldn't even pick it up and hold it in the halo position to start with. So the halo is when you turn it to the side, take all the way around your head and bring it back to the front. I couldn't even hold it there because the wobble of the weight at the top was just too great for my forearms to take at the time. And I thought it had good climbing strength as well, but it was like not good climbing strength, good grip strength at the time, but it was piss all compared to trying to like pivot a weight like that with that long of a staff. And then crack on to when I started training for this week one, I picked up that same weight I couldn't even hold, and I'm cracking at like 30 halos per side in like rapid succession. So the difference in training has been massive since then for me using these maces. So the way that I'm training for this one, I've set out is a 12-week training program, and it's very specific. It's super specific, and it's just go hard or go home now. It's like you've got 12 weeks to get really specific for this event, so you're going to just pretty much ignore lower body, and you're going to focus solely on hammer specific movements. So there's 3 sessions a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday are all about strength training and movement efficiency for hammering. So I'm going in and using a super heavy mace and a super light mace, and I'm mimicking the exact hammering movement I'm doing on the day. I'm doing it more strength based using the really heavy mace, and I'm going for time. And then I'm coming in with the super light mace, which is lighter than the hammer, and I'm looking at how much force, like how much speed can I develop. So getting that movement pattern as efficient as possible, drilling it in, not just muscularly, but also neurologically, trying to get my brain in that sensation of this pattern you're going to be repeating for hours all day long. Let's get it as efficient as possible. And then after I finish that, because that's kind of almost like my compound lift would have normally been that in that exercise, it's complementary sort of work on the side. But I start with a little bit of prehab stuff, focusing on the shoulders and the wrists and the grip more, and then moving into doing more strength training around the body just to look after the specific structures and making sure they're not breaking down too much and they're nice and robust for the day. So it's not about those bits that come afterwards don't necessarily make me more efficient, but they make me more robust and not crack like an egg on the day, so I can just keep going no matter what. And then I can just rely on my endurance to just keep going and see where that mental barrier is and physical barrier, but I can trust that my body's not going to break down and injure in the same way then, especially with the forearms now. In between that then, on the Tuesday and the Thursday, we just got a long slog. Just go in there with Mjolnir, the hammer, as I've called it, after Thor's hammer, just the hammer from before, and just slog out as many hits as you can in like X period of time. I try and just increase that endurance every week, but some weeks I just haven't got the time to go further and further. So say 1 week I'm doing an hour session, maybe I wanted to try to do 90 minutes 1 week, I might end up having only got time to do a 45-minute hammering session. But it's just getting that specific thing in the body and drilling it and telling it like, this is the stressor, this is what your body's going to do. Get good at it, because that's the only input that's going in now. There's no, like, I'm not swinging a kettlebell, I'm not deadlifting, I'm not doing anything like that, because it just doesn't fit the very tight rule book of what this movement is, and it's just got to be all around that for the next 12 weeks for me, which is very different to how I've done it before, because I normally try and look after those other structures like deadlifting and stuff, and like a bit of other body support, but I've just cut that out, and if it doesn't fit, it's gone.
So the main point from this one over the last one is you've got like the little specific technical things and the sort of maintenance of your body that you didn't pick up from before.
Yeah.
And then other than that, you've just gone super specific, whereas before a bit more general with some specific sessions. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been more of a taper in the past, where this has just been like I've been building enough for the year in between training, dicking around with trying to do different challenges and them going wrong and different projects failing, and then just having some like recovery time and some just general playing around with different training models and doing some maintenance blocks. I've built a much bigger base anyway throughout the year anyway, so that base training was almost there. That kind of like winter section of like getting wintered, building this good base up, this foundation was already there, so this was more just get super specific in that time frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got your goal, you've got your training in place. Is there anything else that you're going to do beforehand? What else are you looking at building? Because you're going to need like a team for the day. How are you going to come up with that? What sort of support do you need? And then we'll also link in the donations to your why at the end of the podcast, like in the show notes.
One of the biggest things for me on the day is a feeder. I need someone to remind me to eat, because even though I'm good with the food and my preference normally is like real food, like fruit and stuff, I need someone to be there, just hand me a candy bar and be like, you need to eat this, dude. You just need to eat this now.
Are you going to plan out your food beforehand, like how much you need to be eating and when? And
ideally, every half hour I want to take in something like 20-30 grams of carbohydrates. And because I follow like a higher fat diet as well, using that word too much, the kind of thought behind it is to train more on a lower carb kind of routine throughout the week. Not low carb, but reduced compared to what will be on the like typical training, like slightly reduced carbohydrate intake, higher fat, and then on the day just go ham on carbs and just actually have that fuel in there. So it's like you're used to training lower, so you're a bit more fatigued sometimes, but then on the day having that like rocket fuel injection of like a lot more, not fatigued, but used to training on lower carbs, and then on the day it's like rocket fuel when it comes in, but then some like steady fats throughout the day, so things like like peanut butter and getting some bananas in and pot noodles. But it's like all that naughty food that I would like to have, not naughty food, but like all the kind of like really high energy food that I'm not necessarily smashing now. On the day, I'm just going to like let the cap open and eat whatever I want, because it's going to be whatever gets the job done.
Yeah. So are you going to have like a specific like amount of food? Because like the way I've thought about dieting for challenges before is I'm going to have like set food at set times. Or is it just going to be like just a massive selection on a table, and then whenever you're hungry you just sort of go?
It'd probably be more like have a table with like bits of everything on there that fit the bill of what I'm looking for in terms of like the macro distribution. Like my dad is known as pork pie on the Tour de Gaulle race, because he used to keep going about how pork pies had a great composition, because they're good part protein, good part fat, good part carbohydrates, and some salts in them. So he would go on about it, and they were like, shut the fuck up, pork pie, and it became like his nickname from Craig. Photography Craig, who I used to work for, started calling him pork pie all the time because of it, so it became a bit of a running joke. So pork pie is of course going to be on the table for that, but then I'm hoping to also the support of, because it's down at the next to the Good Sheds, our gym is, and we used to be part of the Good Sheds where we were. I'm hoping to have a couple of the food vendors supporting on the day as well. So I mean, hopefully if that goes well, there'll be access to things like Who Caught Donuts and Mr. Crowich, which is, as we've sampled, really good chicken burgers and the fries.
Very nice.
So Em, who actually, I don't know if she owns or helps manage, I'm not too sure 100% on that one, so don't quote me, but Emma is actually one of our clients at Browd as well, so it would be really nice to have them come support on the day just to tie. I like working with people I know that I'm friendly with, and if it gives them a little lift as well, like, rising tide lifts all boats, so I'd like to help out where I can with that and hope. Plus the food's amazing, to eat that on the day and get multiple rounds of it in is just it's worth doing the event just for that in itself, just to eat that volume of food guilt-free. Who called donut as well I'm hoping for, because I want to try the donut burger. It's happening. I can feel it's coming soon.
You got to do it. It's down the road from you, man.
I know. Just go there, just buy it and smash it together.
I'll come with.
We'll do an episode just talking about food. But yeah, cool. So it's not really a plan. It's more like have all the food there and then get someone to every half hour be like, look, you need a bit of carbs, you need a bit of carbs, you need a bit of fat, you need a bit of carbs. Just coming over and making sure that I'm eating regularly. I struggled with that on the yoke carry a lot because I only really have my old man supporting with food, and I was like, no, I'm good, I don't need to eat. And he'd be like, you need to fucking eat. And I'm like, no, I'm good, I don't need to eat. And then Josh came down, and stuff from a CF, he loses a lot more salts than the average person, so he was quite worried about my salt intake, and he's like, you're getting enough on? I was like, yeah, I'm fine, just dumping all these Tenzing energy drink powders into my water bottle. I just, everything I knew about nutrition, I kind of just died that day. It's my head was pounding with the bloody sun beating down, and I was covered up like I was doing a bloody Death Valley race with that. I had one of those proper long fishing hats on and glasses and a face cover, just because it was so bloody hot. Not that the heat was that intense, but it was just being out in it all day. I was just covered. I couldn't think straight, and because you get in that headspace and you're trying to count things as well with reps, because I had the actual ticker I used for the Hammerthon was tied on the frame, and I had a live stream there as well on the phone, so I was trying to talk to that and make sure that was running. So I was trying to run the tech on that and do the ticker while just trying to do the sport as well. So it was really hard to concentrate on the food, and that's where having someone who helps feed you, or a team of people who kind of help make sure you're eating enough, I find is really helpful on the day. They just take some of the thinking out of it for you, especially with the stuff that I like doing is not your typical kind of what your type 1 fibers are built for. More so with running, at least it's a lot more type 1 fiber dominance. It's more endurance based. Whereas carrying a yoke, we're not really built for that innately to carry stuff like that, or pushing tyre at Pen Events, that kind of muscle group of pushing for the chest and the shoulders. It's not that kind of normal movement pattern. Hammering, I found that with as well, is they're not really, we've got some hanging endurance in us for sure with let's just even climbing, but that movement pattern is not really one that you'd normally think is endurance based. So they become very the lats in particular, I've always found with me and my own body at least, is that my lats do not like being taxed in terms of endurance a lot. They get very achy, very dull, very painful quite quickly. So I guarantee they're going to be in agony somewhere on the day. So it's just working around that really.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've covered everything to do with the prep for your challenge now. Mm-hmm. We're going to do another episode after you finished to come back and review and see what you've learnt this time. But until then, what is one piece of advice you would give to the listeners?
That's a really good one based off of this. I would say be prepared, because sometimes you go out in the world looking for what to do. Sometimes you kick back and go with the flow and it comes looking for you, and you better be ready to take the call when it comes. Yeah.
So more along the lines of don't just prepare for the things that you know are coming.
Yeah.
Also think about being prepared for things that could happen.
Don't just prepare for the good times.
Yeah. I like it. All right. So thank you for doing this episode. Nice to have you back on the podcast.
I know, I've missed you.
Yeah, you missed a couple of episodes now.
It's been sad.
Yeah. This chair's been getting lonely and it hasn't even seen you today. But
what's going on?
Next time. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you guys for listening.
Thanks for listening, gang.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube, and share our content around. It helps more than you can ever imagine. Now, if there's a person in particular that you want to hear from, or a topic that you want us to cover, just drop us a message, let us know in our DMs, and we'll make sure we try and reach out to the relevant people to cover that topic for you. We're always trying to make content that you guys want to listen to. We have just dropped our website. It's adventureathletes.co.uk, and you can go on there to find out the range of different services we offer. So we have sports massage, different training programs, and personal training, both online and in person, you can sign up to on the website. So make sure you go and check us out at adventureathletes.co.uk.